expanding our roots. I just want to let you know that this is an opportunity for you to tell your story, for you to express yourself, to talk about the work that you've been doing, and to also just share whatever you want to share with the people who may be watching. This isn't just for, Louisiana. This is also for others who are from other parts of the world who need to see Louisiana as a place of consciousness and culture, as I would like to say. So the first question I always ask, and this is a question that is purposeful because there's always a start to the journey. And the start of our journey as people who are seeking change and wanting change and creating change is our roots. Mm-hmm. Where are you from? Where are you coming from?
So that's a simple answer for me. Coming from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, born and raised, went through East Baton Rouge public school system my entire life. Now have started a family with my husband in Baton Rouge. And so I have a divine love from where I'm from. And I like to say that I organize from a place of passion and compassion for the people of Baton Rouge, because I want to see us doing well, because Baton Rouge is my hometown. So not exactly a transplant, been here, like I said, my entire life. So I'm just excited to do any work, especially with you, Jahi, to be able to progress Baton Rouge forward.
So I wanted to first kind of get into your experiences being in Baton Rouge as a Black person, and also in your eyes as a Black woman, because a lot of the people that I've interviewed are from Baton Rouge, but they're from very different parts of Baton Rouge. Some people from North Baton Rouge, some people from Mid-City, some people from old South Baton Rouge, some people from far south like Shenandoah area. What part of Baton Rouge did you grow up in, and how did your experiences growing up in Baton Rouge shape you as a person? Not specifically as an organizer, but as a person.
I grew up primarily in the Bluebonnet, Segan Lane area. And so, which is a really up and coming area of Baton Rouge. I would be remiss to say that I didn't grow up very privileged to be able to be in that side of Baton Rouge. And I can honestly say, as a Black woman, my experience is probably very different from a lot of my peers or colleagues that I currently work with in Baton Rouge. I would definitely say that it's made me the person I am today. Growing up, I went to Woodlawn High School, and I like to tell folks a lot of times that's pretty much when I got into understanding who I was as a Black woman and what that meant in a city like Baton Rouge. And so, even though it has its advantages, definitely, there's quite a bit of times I can recount being, I don't want to say a victim, but like someone who's experienced adversity as a result of being a Black woman in the privileged side of Baton Rouge, not necessarily being seen as competent or understanding the struggles of those who grew up in North Baton Rouge, but then also not being, white enough to be in some of the roles or positions that I have gone after in Southeast Baton Rouge or Bluebonnet area.
So when I'm asking the question about how did it feel to grow up in Baton Rouge, specifically where you are, I'm asking this because I feel like everybody in Baton Rouge has a different idea of Baton Rouge. There are some people who grow up and Baton Rouge is accessible to them. They're in walking distance of a grocery store. They fit in very well with the culture here. Then there are some people like me who didn't have that opportunity. I felt like an outsider. I felt like I wasn't an outcast, but I didn't feel like I quite fit in. And the only place I felt like I fit into was in my own home, because I was nurtured by a family of people who themselves were kind of outsiders. So they always nurtured me to be different and to think different and to be an individual, even though I felt like I wasn't allowed to be that outside of my home.
It's so interesting because even though I can't say that I lived the same experience, I definitely experienced some of the same scenarios that you probably did. Although, Baton Rouge, Southeast Baton Rouge, where I grew up in the Bluebonnet, Segan Lane area, obviously super accessible to any grocery store business that you might want to make it to. But I would definitely say that it wasn't until I got to college that I realized that my upbringing in Baton Rouge, in that particular part of Baton Rouge, has absolutely nothing to do with where I go, how far I go, what I plan to do as a Black woman, career wise. Like, I don't think it played a role in my successes as a result of being raised in this specific part of town, even though I did have the opportunities to advance myself that someone from North Baton Rouge that did not have the same experiences or access to equitable resources like a grocery store may have had. I definitely, I can say I experienced life as a Black woman as any other woman would, as any other Black woman would that was raised in another part of Baton Rouge. And so I'm actually really grateful for those experiences, though, because I definitely am able to, like my job as an organizer currently for a local nonprofit organization, I'm able to organize from a lens, a racial justice lens, as a result of my experiences. So even though I thank my mom and dad and the Lord for being able to grow up in an environment that was healthy and definitely afforded me opportunities to be able to advance myself education wise. I know that it was just as much a struggle for me as a Black woman because I was just seen as just a Black woman, but trying to break into some of these careers or roles that others that may have been raised in other parts of the city have also tried to obtain. With that being said, I still feel very strongly about Baton Rouge and still feel like the work that I'm doing and currently the work that I'm holding as an organizer is important and not just important, but is beneficial for the next Black woman that looks like me to be able to advance herself as well. So yeah, that's for me, that's Baton Rouge.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about the work that you do because I feel like when you're doing organizing work, there are some people who are kind of born into it. It's like they want to do it they've always wanted to do it either in a political sense or in an organizing sense. And then there are some people who kind of fall into it. I was somebody who fell into it. I think it's interesting that you talk about like how Baton Rouge, growing up in where you were in Baton Rouge, didn't necessarily alter your career paths. You kind of your experiences were the universal Black woman's experience growing up in Baton Rouge. Because for me, I do feel as though where I grew up kind of influenced my whole experiences. I mean, I didn't feel like I fit in. So because I was growing up in a very segregated, very disenfranchised part of the city, and because I had very unique experiences of dealing with trauma and stigmatization, all these other things, I didn't feel like Baton Rouge is my community. So that made me want to go to other places. I went to New Orleans, I went to Baltimore, I went to New England. And then by way of my own growth and evolution, felt like home was calling me back. So I went back home and witnessing the summer of 2016 and just having my own metamorphosis, decided to start being more involved in my community. So I honestly did not think I would be doing anything in my community at all about a decade ago. And here I am doing this. Did you always seek to be an organizer, or did you just kind of fall into that role? And if it's more of the latter, tell me how that journey looked like going from where you were probably a decade or 5 years ago to this point now when you are doing organizing work.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I'm hearing you like say this out loud, Jahi, it sounds like our journeys were quite similar. 10 years ago, I mean, I was a freshman in college at LSU, and my goal was strictly to be a physician. And so the track that I was on was pre-medicine, graduated from college, biology pre-med, never would have guessed 5 years ago that I would have fell into organizing, as you stated. But I had an interest in law, or like sparked an interest in law, started working for a law firm, and then kind of fell into organizing. There was an opportunity at a local organization called Step Up Louisiana, and the co-director there, Maria, was kind enough to bring me on and saw some potential there. And I think as I was evolving as a Black woman that had just graduated from college, and of course, like, especially attending an HBCU, like you have so many opportunities to basically kind of find yourself in college, if you will. And I found myself just interested in various issues that impacted people that look like me every single day. And I could not get away from that. And I quickly learned that, like, even though there was like a phrase at the time that, oh, politics doesn't necessarily have anything to do with me, you can keep it separate. I was finding as a minority, it's pretty impossible to be Kaitlyn and then be Kaitlyn, the Black woman. Like it's absolutely impossible to separate the two. And as a result, like you were impacted daily by different political decisions, by different decisions based on race. Like the list is long. And so I kind of just was, I like to call it it was a magnet, like constantly calling, bringing me back to policy and politics and organizing. And so I fell into Step Up Louisiana, and I did not pursue medicine as I had thought was just like my only passion in life, right? And so found out and figured out that I was really good at organizing and enjoyed bringing equity and justice to people that, like I said, that looked like me. And so I kind of like just the different situations, like you said, the summer of 2016, I was very heavily involved with that with my sister, and just making sure that we lift up the concerns and voices of disenfranchised communities to the point where I just knew that this was like a calling. And so, of course, attended quite a few the 821 Project events and got some knowledge there, did some trainings, and then just quickly immersed myself into anything that was about bettering my community. And so here I am 5 years later, still organizing and excited to do the work. And for me, it's rewarding, right? It's rewarding to be able to do anything that's going to uplift my community.
And I know that you are now with the Power Coalition. That's the organization that you kind of are referencing. And just to make sure that people who are watching or listening are able to connect the dots, that you're with the Power Coalition. And I know that the Power Coalition has been doing a lot of work right now. At the time of this interview, Louisiana has a special election to fill a vacancy for the 2nd congressional seat that former Congressman Cedric Richmond left vacant when he went to take a job with President Joe Biden's administration. And now that election is tomorrow, it's on a Saturday. But before I talk about just the work you're doing for this specific election, I want you to talk to me more about what the Power Coalition is and the type of work that you do.
The Power Coalition for Equity and Justice is a host of organizations that are committed to providing disenfranchised, underserved communities with the tools and resources to be able to bring equity and justice to their community. So that's everything from making sure that we're civically engaged year round, not just during elections, making sure that we're advocating for ourselves at the Capitol, making sure that we're organizing and building coalitions year round to be able to say, hey, I have a voice and these issues matter to me, and I'm going to hold you accountable as an elected official. At the Power Coalition, we believe that the people that are closest to the problem are the ones that have the solution, that everyone's allowed to have equitable and fair elections, and we should most certainly hold our elected officials accountable. So my favorite part about working at the Power Coalition is that we do our best to make sure that we are inclusive to minority, not just organizations, but also minority communities, like I said, underserved populations, disenfranchised communities that feel forgotten about 365. And so we purposely make it our mission to provide them with tools and resources to provide equity and justice for their community. So that looks like every other weekend, having a special event that's inclusive, having some listening sessions, some civic engagement rallies at the Capitol, you name it, we're doing it. So it's very rewarding work.
So one thing that I noticed when I was doing my research, because I do my research before I interview everybody, so I don't freestyle it that much. And one thing that I noticed is that the team that you work with is comprised of mostly Black women. I don't think that should be something that we sweep under the rug, because that is significant. There are a lot of organizations locally and nationally who don't always have people who are representative, or they may have like 1 or 2 Black women and everybody else are Black men or white men or whatever the case might be. How does it feel to be surrounded by people who look like you and share your experiences while you're doing this work with your community?
Pure excellence, like Black excellence. And that's the easiest way that I could put it. My favorite part about my job is just being able to say that we're not only saying that Black folks are enough and we are knowledgeable, we're intelligent, we are capable of our jobs and our roles, but we're showing folks that we're enough. So to me, there's nothing better than leading by example. And my boss, Ashley Shelton, who is the CEO and executive director of Power Coalition for Equity and Justice, she leads by example every single day. We always like to joke that she stole me from another organization, and so and that's just like a playful thing that we always say. Step Up Louisiana is actually under our umbrella, so I still work very closely with my old bosses. But what's so rewarding is just being able to have a seat at the table for, like you said, other women that look like me that are doing the work, that are just making sure that folks in our community are not forgotten about. And to me, that makes it easy for me to wake up every morning to be able to say that I'm doing the work with Black women. Like, how powerful is that?
Yeah, it's significant because oftentimes I feel as though those things are not always considered. It's like you do the work for your community, but if you feel underrepresented in that work, it's kind of hard to get the support that you need to do. I mean, I've been in spaces where I've been the only Black person, the only young Black person, the only young person. And when I have a vision for my community that isn't shared because there are vast cultural or generational differences, and let's be clear, difference is not a bad thing. It's great to be surrounded by difference because you're able to have, if you're around people who are different but affirm you, that's very powerful to be affirmed by people who don't always share your experiences. And also, if you are around people who are different from you and think differently, it can cause you to fine tune your own points of view and your own perspectives. The only issue is when you're surrounded by people who are different from you and they do not want to see your point of view, or they just literally cannot see your point of view. So that might be because you grew up in a different generation, a different side of town, you're of a different race. So when you're surrounded by people who share your lived experiences, it really does help make it easier for you to do the work. It's very significant. And for me, I love diversity. Obviously, A21 is all about diversity. But the reason why we are all about diversity is not necessarily in the sense of every organization needs to have every single ethnic and racial group represented, because that's not always realistic, depending on where you are. And also, representation doesn't always lead to inclusion. But I also think of diversity in the sense of marginalized groups of society being able to do the work and be just as well represented and heard as those who are from non-marginalized communities as well.
Absolutely. And I absolutely agree with you, Jahi. And so, like I said, it just reiterates this idea that even though we may not always be seen in other spaces that aren't minority led, we still are enough and we still add value to the work. And that's with no caveat attached to it. And so, being a part of the Power Coalition and being a part of I'd say 80, 90% Black female team, just leads me to believe that we can get to the promised land with us. And that's totally enough. That's okay. And even if we may not have folks in spaces that don't look like us, that don't understand us, my sister and the girl that looks like me and that has experienced the same journey that I've taken is going to have my back and is going to understand things from my lens, and we're going to be able to organize from a racial justice perspective wholeheartedly.
Well, I have a couple of questions to ask you with regards to the Power Coalition. And I guess I would have to preface them by saying my questions are like in different categories. So I want to ask questions about the work that you're doing now. And I also want to kind of pick your brain with regards to some issues that are relevant to like the socio-political landscape in Louisiana that aren't necessarily right now, but are very, very important. So I first want to know what kind of work you all have been doing with regards to the previously passed 2020 presidential election and the work that you all are doing right now with regards to the special election for the second congressional district in Louisiana.
So with the 2020 elections, last year with the presidential election, we were doing a lot of course, canvassing, door knocking, investing in our Black and Brown communities to be able to turn out the vote, registering folks like never before to be able to generate the amount of support we knew that we needed in order to turn that election around, in order to flip that seat, if you will. A lot of phone banking, a lot of texting, a lot of listening sessions and candidate forums and one-on-one conversations to be able to encourage folks to get out the vote. with the 2021 special election, I think we're doing a little bit of a different approach, which I'm excited to say. We're having harder conversations. The listening sessions and the candidate forums that we are putting on are more about long-term issues and issues that impact our daily lives and how we can affect that process and hold our elected officials accountable in the long term. Even though it is a special election and we know someone else will be elected in the next 2 years, what we're looking to do right now, because it isn't such a heavy election cycle, is to be able to build a base, if you will. Power Coalition has done quite a few elections over the last few years, unanimous jury a few years back, No on Two, if you remember that campaign. And then now leading up to this moment where we're talking about special elections, we find that it's very important for us to invest in our Black and Brown communities, to be able to say that we're not just knocking on your door during election season when it's time for something like a special election, but instead we're taking the information and the conversations that we're having at the doors currently to be able to turn that into a long-term campaign, a long-term an issue-based coalition, if you will. We're hearing folks and we're trying to understand from the ground up how we can address their issues, how we can relate that to the advocacy work that we're already doing at the legislature, especially like coming up in 2021. We've got the legislative session coming up in about 3 weeks, making sure that we really are lifting up the concerns of the people that we claim to advocate for year round. So what I'm very proud to say is we're doing more heavy lifting right now. It's not so much like, hey, go get registered just to go vote, but more so, how can you keep your voice in the game? How can you use your voice as power in the long term? How can you evoke change in your community? How can you address things like gun violence and other issues that are plaguing our communities during the coronavirus pandemic? How can you relate that to, the domestic violence that you might be going through currently? And how can we help? How can we fill in the gaps for jobs that are currently lost, people that are financially struggling? So it's building out a larger power map or power cluster, if you will, to be able to help us understand what the real needs are in our BIPOC communities. As the Baton Rouge organizer, as well as the faith organizer, I do a lot of organizing with churches. And as we know, it's no secret, a lot of Black and Brown communities in the Baton Rouge area are ascribed to a local religion, a church or affiliation of some sort, a congregation, if you will. And we're using that opportunity to be able to say, hey, like, we're speaking with your pastor about the issues that you're talking to him about, and we'd like to come and speak with you about these issues and how we can relate that back to the work that we're doing on a daily basis. So we're doing more base building right now, and I love moments like this where it's not a rush of, hey, let's just get folks to the elections, but more so like, why do you matter and why should you invest in yourself to be able to say, I am important enough for me to care about, to advocate on these issues, to hold these elected officials accountable and make sure that my voice is heard. And so to me, this has been the most rewarding part of the work since I've joined the team, because I am able to build relationships with folks. And to me, that's more important than anything.
The next question I wanted to ask you was relevant to some of the issues that, I guess, some issues that I hear come up a lot, because I do see that many people are kind of turned off from politics or getting involved in political change because they don't really see change happening. And it usually comes when the political system is not democratic, small d. And one of the many issues that come up in Louisiana when it comes to this idea of a true democracy, one is redistricting and the other one is gerrymandering. So what are your thoughts on these two specific issues? And also, if possible, what can you say about the work that the Power Coalition is doing to kind of either address these issues head on or at least bring more awareness to these issues so that other groups and other individuals can kind of speak out about it?
Absolutely. And so, oh my gosh, that's a great question, which I feel like redistricting and combating gerrymandering on a daily basis is part of my work plan right now. And just gearing up for the Census 2020 data being released later this year, and for us to be able to mobilize around that, organize around that on the local level, state level, federal level. So I'll start with your first question, and I'll just say, I can't blame folks. I cannot blame folks for being disinterested or uninterested in politics as it pertains to voting and their voice. Because if you lived in a gerrymandered district, which quite a few of us do in these 64 parishes in the state of Louisiana, you will definitely feel like you don't have a voice, or that there's no point in going to the polls because depending on whatever party you affiliate yourself with or whatever party you ascribe to, you technically do not have an opportunity or an opportunity to put in the candidate of your choice, and that's frustrating. And so, what we're doing at the Power Coalition to be able to combat that and alleviate some of this, what we call just bad mapping, is we have been offering redistricting academies to be able to educate folks and give them the knowledge and the tools and the resources to understand that Louisiana, for quite some time, for a few decades, have been drawing maps that are inequitable and not of justice. And during those redistricting academies, we pair up with SCSJ, which is a national organization that is committed to giving knowledge to those who are interested on gerrymandering and being able to provide us with what we call Dave's Redistricting, which is a mapping software that shows you how to draw maps equitably and how to stop drawing maps that are not beneficial to a certain minority. During those redistricting academies, not only do we give folks the software piece of that, we give them a component that is organizing and building coalition and support around redistricting, which simply says, we'll take a school board example for a school board situation, for example. Hey, we've got some school board members, like let's say we minimized or increased a board and the amount of folks that sit on that board to be able to represent a certain minority in the district, or we did the opposite. We're saying, no, we're going to come in and we're going to hold elected officials that are drawing these maps accountable for these districts, and make sure that the districts that they're planning to. Power Coalition for Equity and Justice has partnered with SCSJ, which is a national organization that is committed to giving knowledge, tools, resources to minority communities, disenfranchised communities, to be able to say, hey, this is why your voice doesn't matter. And we're going to give you all of the tools to be able to change that. So during the redistricting academies, and we're actually offering one in about 4 weeks, it's the first 5 weeks, first week of May, we're going to offer another redistricting academy. And during that academy, you learn everything from why Louisiana is the way it is, why our districts are drawn 70-30 in some areas, why a lot of minority groups are never going to have a real voice without redrawing the districts with the census data. Aside from that, we give folks the tools and resources to be able to organize on a local level around anything from school districts, city councils, to make sure that the folks that are sitting on those boards are representative of the folks that live in that district. We also provide a component for folks to be able to be fellows. And fellows are a redistricting, a major part of the redistricting process, because they hold elected officials that are actually drawing the map, from legislators to Governor John Bel Edwards, accountable and say, hey, this map is equitable, this one is not. And we would like to see you veto this map that doesn't make sense and keep this one that does. So during the redistricting academies, which we are very proud to offer, a lot of folks are just not only gaining knowledge and being able to spread that within their community, but they're also bringing more folks to the table, which to me is exciting, because that's how you build people power. The more people know and understand how redistricting works and how drawing maps is a part of the process for making sure that our voices are heard, the better it is, and the more folks you'll see engaged in the community. The reason why a lot of times we see folks are no longer interested in investing in voting or any type of policy or candidate forums, or the list is long, is because they're not seeing, like you said, real change. And this gives them an opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to take hold of the situation. I'm going to take a major role in it, or a minor role. That's how awesome redistricting is. There's a piece of it for everyone who's interested in being able to make real change on the local level, state level, et cetera. So that has been my favorite part about redistricting academies, just seeing folks engage, send that information over to their congregations, their networks, and bring more people to the table so that we can really, like I said, build people power and create real change in 2021.
So I'm thinking about this conversation that I had with my grandmother about the congressional districts and how they're drawn. And I'm also thinking about what you just said about how a lot of districts don't allow for representation for minority voices, or as I would say, marginalized voices. And I'm looking at this district. I don't know if the people can see it, but this one, it's barely showing up because there's probably a glare from the light, but the district is Louisiana's 5th congressional district. And to give a sense of how crazily gerrymandered this district is, the northernmost point of the district is literally located at the top northeastern part of the Mississippi, like Arkansas kind of corner. And then the other side of this district is Bogalusa, Louisiana. To give you perspective of how insane these 2 points are, we're in the Baton Rouge area, metropolitan area. We are both 3.5 hours from the northeastern part of the district in North Louisiana. We're also 1.5 hours to 2 hours west of the other corner of the district, and if you're trying to get from one end of the district to the other, you have to go through an entirely different state just to get to the other side of that district. It doesn't make any sense. And also the 2nd congressional district is heavily gerrymandered as well. I mean, that 2nd district represents 2 of Louisiana's largest cities, Baton Rouge and New Orleans, in one district. There are very few districts in the country that represent 2 major metropolitan areas in the same district. And New Orleans and Baton Rouge are not the same necessarily when it comes to our cultures and our political landscapes. I mean, we're more in the middle of the spectrum, and New Orleans is more progressive, more liberal in terms of culture. So it's like and even with this district, you have people who are running for the office that are more established in Baton Rouge, some are more established in New Orleans, but they still gotta, get votes from Baton Rouge. And then you have people that are more known statewide. So it's a mess. It's a mess.
I will tell you this. I've spoken to legislators on both sides of the spectrum, no matter what political affiliation they may have, and they've all said the same thing. Something has to change. And they've never seen this many folks with these many eyes on this prize, and that is redistricting. There's never been this level of involvement on making sure that these districts are redrawn fairly. And so I'm excited to be able to not only bring folks to redistricting academies to give them that knowledge and the tools and the resources coming out of those meetings, but also to be very hands-on and making sure that we keep these relationships with legislators, letting folks know that they are not untouchable. You are able to reach out to them as they represent you, just as much as they represent the next person. And we need to use our voices and our voices as constituents to be able to say, this can no longer happen. And quite frankly, if it were to continue happening, we would just never see Black and brown voices lifted up. And so we are making sure that folks are advocating heavily on this. As you stated, Jahi, District 2 and District 5 are insanely drawn. It still blows my mind. I constantly explain to my husband all the time. He's like, oh, wait, so what cities are in it? And I'm like, okay, it's all these cities, that aren't necessarily congruent or conducive with each other. And I know that's one of the qualifications for drawing maps, is making sure that they touch at a certain point and that it makes sense. And so we've really got to do the work to be able to undo some of this craziness.
I mean, a congressional district that has Alexandria, Louisiana, and Bogalusa, and Franklinton, and Monroe, and Ruston, and Grambling in the same district. Those of us from Louisiana, we know North Louisiana and Central Louisiana and the North Shore and the Baton Rouge area and the New Orleans area and Acadiana are like different cultural regions. So it's like imagine having New York City and Albany in the same district. That's kind of like the same, like Louisiana's or like Los Angeles and San Francisco in the same district. Like that's like the same kind of concept we have going on. Mm-hmm. And for me, I always wonder, a lot has changed since the last time the districts were drawn. I mean, I think that was like 2011. Mm-hmm. And a lot has changed, not just politically. I mean, we've literally in the last 10 years have had 3 different presidents. We've also had so much change in the landscape. I mean, the House, Senate, the White House has had so many different people changing hands. I mean, we've had different changing of hands with the governorship in Louisiana. Do you feel like more people are paying attention now to what's going on compared to maybe a decade ago in the 2010s?
Absolutely. I think it also goes into just, I mean, even things and nuances, PC things or things that we didn't necessarily hold to the same standard 10 years ago have completely shifted. And as a result, I mean, I will say, obviously, social media definitely plays into that. I've seen so many different campaigns from various universities across the state that are just like, hey, by the way, redistricting is happening and you should be a part of it. And here's why. And it breaks it down in such a way that makes sense for anyone. And so I think 10 years ago, we weren't necessarily utilizing social media to be able to convey some of the most important historical moments in our lives. But now that we can, it definitely plays to our advantage. Aside from that, to answer your question in short, absolutely. I definitely can say, and like I was saying, the conversations that I've had with different legislators, as well as the governor, John Bel Edwards of Louisiana, no one was looking at redistricting in this way. No one with people power. Folks pretty much kind of assumed 10 years ago that legislators and folks that work with them are responsible for redistricting. We just kind of take a back seat to that. And no, that's not true. We do have voice in it. We can advocate for ourselves. We can advocate for our communities, and we can utilize those voices to be able to, like I said, make real change. And so now that folks understand that they do have people power, they're going to use it. Just like we saw in Georgia when they flipped last year, and in many states that made strides towards real progression. I think that now more than ever, folks are all about understanding their voice and using it. And so we are definitely going to see an increase in the amount of folks that actually are at the table when it comes to redistricting this year.
And I hear Georgia come up a lot, more
Yeah.
so. And I want to preface this by saying that 821 is not a political organization. We're nonpartisan. But I would also like to say that Georgia, on that note, Georgia comes up a lot in progressive circles. You know, many southern states are trying to figure out how they can be the next Georgia. I personally don't think that Louisiana can be the next Georgia yet, because Georgia has a lot going on for it that has nothing to do with politics. For example, demographics, the economies are different, the political landscapes are different, and Georgia also has a different history than Louisiana does. So we have to kind of be our own state and think about how we can build power in our own unique way. But I also want to know your take on it, because you mentioned Georgia. Like, what do you think probably needs to happen for Louisiana, not necessarily to be the next Georgia, but to have that kind of political awakening in the way that Georgia did, where a lot of people from marginalized communities are using their power much more fiercely and boldly than in the past?
I think one thing that I can commend Georgia on, and I will, as you stated, a disclaimer, Power Coalition is also a 501c3 nonprofit organization. But because we do work with marginalized, disenfranchised, underserved populations, it is apparent and important for us to be able to lift up the concerns and the voices of those folks, myself included. And when you look at a state like Georgia, one thing that I think, and I agree with you, Jahi, we're not there yet in the state of Louisiana. And the reason why we're not is because I don't think folks understand Georgia didn't happen overnight. That was a 5, 10 year, like a decade's worth of work happening. And what Stacey and her team, which mind you was a large, diverse group of folks to be able to move that work, what they did was they did their homework. They invested in communities. They didn't just show up to say, go vote. They, like I said, they did the listening sessions, the door-to-door canvassing, not to say go vote, but hey, what are you working on? What are your issues? What keeps you up at night? Really doing more listening than actually talking. And I think until a state like Louisiana is willing to join forces with a bunch of different groups at the table, bringing folks on that don't necessarily look like us, bringing folks on that don't have the same walk of life, but have the same mission to be able to lift people, not just out of poverty, but lift them up, lift their concerns and issues up in a way that lets them see how important and valuable they are. Like, it's not not just about registering folks to vote, getting them to the polls, providing them with an actual ride to the polls, but instead making sure that we fill in the gaps in between that. And so in between the years. So it is building people power and building coalition, base building is not something that we can do overnight. But one thing I would like to see us do as nonprofit organizations, yours included, is to really do our homework and really do the heavy lifting, which is asking folks what they need, asking folks what would encourage them to be a part of the political process. And that is relating their issues back to anything policy related, relating their issues to different legislators, to different policymakers that are able to make real change and creating real relationships there, letting them use their voice in that way. So it's so many components that go into being able to flip a state like Georgia, or even just encourage more people to get politically involved. And so I'm hoping that time comes sooner than later, because I would hate for us to miss out on the opportunity to be able to build people power, especially in a time with COVID, where we're seeing folks financially disadvantaged. We're seeing folks socially no longer conducive with their partners, and like having a lot of domestic issues, and folks just going through a lot right now. And so especially like the increase in unhoused population, like little things that we have to do to be able to lift up concerns and issues of folks that aren't just politically related is the only way to the promised land, if you will. And so I'm hoping, like I said, we do that work sooner than later.
Yeah, and I also want to piggyback on that thought by saying that Georgia's collaborative energy is what made it successful. And honestly, I don't always see that in Louisiana. I see that, people are always kind of doing their own thing. I can't speak for New Orleans or Lafayette because I'm not familiar with that context. So I'm not going to speak on behalf of communities I don't represent fully. But I would have to say that being from Baton Rouge, I don't necessarily see a lot of the collaboration that would allow for a Georgia situation to happen in Louisiana, not just in terms of politics, but in terms of just community change as well. But it needs to happen. So I'm not going to say, it's not going to happen. It needs to happen. So to kind of transition the conversation, what do you think needs to happen? I know you mentioned the listening sessions, the nurturing the community, the going out and being a part of the community. But I see that Louisiana becoming a more politically, civically, and even globally engaged community is more diverse collaboration. So not people who have the same exact mission collaborating with one another, but also people who collaborate with one another who may not necessarily have the same exact mission, but have the same values. So for example, maybe if you're trying to reach out to Latino community members in Louisiana, you may have to reach out to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Louisiana to do some work. If you're trying to educate people about possibly environmental issues, you may have to reach out to some Francophone organizations who may do French language stuff, but may be interested in climate change. So they could probably do some French language climate change stuff. I'm a creative person, I have that creative energy, but I'm thinking that more ingenuity and more creativity can allow for the work that many people are doing to be well represented in a way that doesn't feel like we're competing for space or fighting for space. So what do you think about that?
I could not agree more, Jahi. I still think, and I'm going to speak from a local perspective, Baton Rouge, I love the different organizations that are at the table, and I'm excited to see there's even more folks coming to the table and creating orgs. But one thing that I'm still noticing that we do, and I don't think that we will succeed as a whole or as a collective until we get away from operating in silos. Like everything is still a competition. Even if you collaborate or partner with a specific organization or someone in particular, at some point, you don't necessarily keep that relationship. And Baton Rouge, I really think, has the potential to be able to do some more collaborative efforts, do some more inclusive work. But until, like I said, we stop operating in silos and thinking of each org as a competition, I don't think we'll be able to move the needle on a lot of work. What I'm seeing a lot of times, which is really disappointing, is I'll have different meetings with different folks at the table. And as I'm going through meeting, I'm seeing I literally just had this conversation with another org that's doing the exact same thing. Why don't we all work together? But the taboo there, or I guess the fear is credit. And so I think we would stop operating. I wish we would stop operating from a place of credit or due diligence, but more so, what is altruistic for the people? Like, how are the people going to be affected by the work that we do? I always tell anyone whom that I'm working with or partnering with, it's not about me getting credit for the work. Is the work being done? If the work's being done and it's being done in a way that's going to positively affect people that look like me, I'm going to get it done whether I get the credit or not. And so I would like to see Baton Rouge do a better job of welcoming more folks at the table that don't necessarily look like us. We really have to break into a space that is more inclusive. A lot of times I see, everything black and white, black and white. Okay, we need to include our Latino and Asian Pacific Islander brothers and sisters. I don't see that a lot. And so not everything should be, like I said, we shouldn't have to operate in silos, and not everything should just be black and white in terms of diversity, but we need to be open to including more than just folks that look like you and I, or folks that are affiliated with the Caucasian community. And so, yeah, I think that that's the only hold up or hang up in Baton Rouge to being able to progress some of this work forward.
I mean, that's kind of why I did 821. I mean, I was someone who grew up, I mean, just like you went to Woodlawn. And I mean, you're not that much older than me. I'm not going to tell your age because I won't get in trouble. But I will say that you and I are in the same age range. And and I don't know about Woodlawn, but McKinley was diverse. We had Black, white, Latino, Arab, Persian students that were at McKinley. Our teachers were from all over the world. I had a teacher from Libya, a teacher from India, a teacher from Canada, a teacher from different parts of the country. And so growing to school, and these are people who live in the community, because you got to live in the community to go to school in EBR. These are people from that live in the community that are from these groups, but they were never recognized in government, never recognized by other community leaders. It's like my own experiences were never recognized by the people who represented me. And then on top of that, I was just going to New Orleans, going to UNO, and seeing like the diversity in New Orleans. Like, Baton Rouge was more ethnically diverse than I thought. New Orleans was more globally connected than I thought. So as I said about, creating 821, I was thinking, it's not enough for me to just tell people to travel the world and learn another language. Embrace the diversity in this community. And that's why when I did 821, especially in the early years of doing it, I worked really hard to make sure that I had representation from a diverse group of people: Asian Americans, Arab Americans, immigrants, these different communities. And I was very blessed. I've been very, very blessed to have these communities represented in my work, whether it is through the interview series, or whether it is through, the dialogues or workshops or events that we host. But I feel like I have not yet done enough, and I don't want to be the only person that's working to do it either. I want to be one of many. And I really just appreciate you saying that, because I feel like Louisiana is not a binary region. I mean, it wasn't just two distinct cultures who created Louisiana. Louisiana was created by a kaleidoscope of cultures: the French, the enslaved Africans, indigenous, Creole, Spanish. You had English, all these different influences, Caribbean, all these different influences who created Louisiana. So we had this multicultural history. We need to embrace that multicultural present, because that is how these different states that we glamorize politically were able to be successful, because it didn't see binary. They saw a kaleidoscope.
Absolutely. And I can honestly admit, Jahi, your organization, the 821 Project, is probably one of the fewest places I've been, or spaces that I've been in, that were so inclusive, that you had everyone from any and every race included in your group. And so, which is one of the many reasons why I was excited to just be able to participate. But all that to say, until we have that same standard for our own organizations, I don't see us being able, and don't get me wrong, it is achievable. Like, we can totally be more inclusive and be directional in the way that we want to include people at the table. I think it just takes the real desire to be able to do so.
Exactly. Well, I have a couple of final questions to ask. because I want to be conscious of the time. And one of the final questions I have to ask is maybe a little backwards. You know, I try and ask questions in a sequential sense, but I feel like the questions I want to ask you at the end, you covered like in the middle. So I don't want to like get you to repeat yourself. One thing I do want to ask you about specifically are these forums. You all do the candidate forums. I didn't get a chance to do the congressional forum, but I did the forum for the mayor's race last year. And I was just completely like impressed. And I say this not to be patronizing, but to just be like, wow, that they were able to get so many people represented on this forum. Because you usually have a forum, maybe like one or two people show up, or like in the case of 2016, Together Baton Rouge did a forum and only then candidate Sharon Weston Broome showed up, you know, and you all were able to get Mayor Broome and all these different people, you know, on these forums. How does it feel to have these forums and you're able to get these different candidates, you know, to be a part of it, especially knowing that many of them have different statures, different levels of experience, different followings. You know, some of them are already elected officials, so they may be harder to access. Like, how does it feel to be able to put these together?
I guess the best term that comes to mind is exciting. I think that we spend, and I'll speak for myself, I spent a lot of time trying to build a rapport and reputation and relationship with a lot of these folks. And to me, there's nothing more rewarding and exciting than being able to see the world from a different lens, get folks at the table that don't look like me, that want to participate and create dialogue, or try to see our life through our lens, our experience through our lens. So these forums really give us the opportunity to be able to do that and bring it to folks in the comfort of their home, especially during COVID. That's been my favorite part about putting on these candidate forums, is being able to stream it live and bring folks a host of range of different ideas and opinions from different elected officials that they necessarily would not engage with in person. So it's exciting, Jahi, to be honest. Like it's been a complete honor to be able to get to know each and every candidate vying for an elected office over the course of the last year or so, and put on these successful candidate forums. And quite frankly, I also do attribute that to partnership. I will never discount the power of partnership. And a lot of times you'll see Power Coalition will invite, you name it, we are inviting them to be able to partner with us as we see fit and as it makes sense to the table, to be able to put these candidate forums and bring them to everyone in their homes. So I think that also has a lot to do with it. Like, a lot of folks may have relationships with you, but also they have relationships with other folks from different organizations that are able to bring them to the table as well. So definitely think the power of partnership definitely contributes to the work when putting on the candidate forums.
Yeah, relationship building is very important because, I mean, for me, when I do the Expanding Our Roots interview series, I oftentimes, when I reach out to people who I know and then some people I don't know. When I first started it, I wasn't quite sure it would, you know, be worth it. So I reached out to people that I knew very well, who I was sure I would say yes. But then as I started to kind of do more interviews and kind of go along with it, I started reaching out to people I didn't know. And my whole premise of it was, I'm not going to reach out to these people and be like, hey, can you join my interview series? Thanks, bye, see you never. It's more so, hey, I'm bringing you into my work. Please follow this journey, because this journey includes your work. You know, I've interviewed organizations, you know, I've spent years trying to get people in New Orleans involved in the work. So I've been blessed to be able to talk to people in New Orleans, you know, to be involved. And I'm like, no, this ain't a, hey, I'm gonna ask you to join my interview series and you'll never hear from me again. This is a, hey, I want to bring you into my work so that way you know that your work is being seen and represented. And I want to make sure that I do my best. It may not be perfect, it may not go viral, but I want to do my part to make sure your work is visible to other people. And those who are in tune to 821, but not in tune to everything else in the world, are those who aren't even in tune to Louisiana and may have these preconceived notions of what Louisiana is. They are a part of it. But all of the work that I am doing is trying to build relationships, because nobody wants to be used. Nobody wants to feel as though you're asking them for something and you'll never hear from them again. Everybody wants to feel nurtured, especially during this pandemic. And so I think that relationships building is important, because when you build those nurturing relationships, even in activism and organizing, then you are building a community and you're building a movement.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm right there with you. I always tell anyone that I'm giving advice on regarding organizing, you never want to be transactional. And if you're in this work for transactional purposes, this is not the work for you, right? So, agreed. Partnership, building relationships, always.
So I have one final question to ask, and it seems kind of obnoxious, but I always think about the fact that I've been in job interviews, I have been interviewed, and sometimes when you end the interview, you have this feeling of, man, I should have said this. You have this feeling of, I wish I could have expressed more. I wish I could have said more. I said something earlier and I feel kind of awkward about it. So let me go back and maybe kind of clarify what I meant. So I want to give you an opportunity to kind of talk about, something that you feel you hadn't had a chance to share, maybe something you kind of want to elaborate a little bit more on, or maybe some final words you want to kind of leave for others, as we wrap up the conversation that we're having.
Kind of going back to what I was saying in the beginning about where I was raised and like growing up in a specific part of Baton Rouge in the Bluebonnet area, um, not really dictating my walk of life or, not necessarily giving too much of an advantage versus others that had a different walk of life. What I would say, just to other women, especially other Black women, is especially in organizing, never allowing that to limit who you are and never allowing where you grew up or what you've been through, what your experience has been as a Black woman to dictate how far you can go in this work. Everyone has a place in this work. And if you're led to it, you're led to it for a reason. So I guess my only final word would just be allow yourself to go through this journey and really get to know yourself through this journey to be able to be the best organizer that you can. And so that's something that I find myself like, even in my relationship, with my husband or how I am with my daughter, every part of me is somewhat of an organizer, whether it's communication skills, etc. And so it definitely helps me in my daily walk of life, being able to figure out who I am and my place and my purpose by just, you know, allowing myself to be limitless in organizing and understanding my purpose as a faith organizer. So if you're called to do that and if you're led to do this work, then just trust the process and enjoy the journey while you're going through it.
Because we all have power. We
Yeah.
all have power. Support Power Coalition by attending the candidate forums, attending the workshops, attending the meetings, and also make sure that you are outspoken about gerrymandering and redistricting, because politicians shouldn't get to choose their voters. We need to choose them. I want to thank you so much for the work that you all do in the community. And yeah, just thank you. All I got to say, thank you.
Thank you. I can say the same thing. I appreciate this interview and, of course, everything you're doing at the 821 Project.